in this exercise, I will have to implement in Python to implement the class interval with some basic operations, binary operators such as plus, minus, and so on, and the function, elementary function such as exponential, square root, and so on. The resulting library should be called myinterval.py. So I will start with Python, file new, and I will save it. Save as. I will call it my interval.py. Save. Okay. Now this interval, for this interval library, I will use first import math, because I will use sine, cos, square, and so on. And I will implement now my interval class. Class interval. I have first to define the constructor. So def the constructor init. The interval is x, and the bounds will be a and b. So if a greater than b, then x dot lower bound will be equal to not a number, because in this case a should be smaller than b, because it corresponds to the interval ab. So if x a greater than b, then both x and y will be initialized to not a number. So x dot upper bound will also be initialized to not a number. Probably I will have to define what is not a number. Not a number is a float which corresponds to not a number. So it is a variable I define here. So I will go in the console of Python to explain this. So what is if I define here not a number, or let's say a, equal to not a number, to float of not a number. So what is a not a number? It's a specific value of the processor, such that, for instance, a not a number plus 8 equal not a number. A times 3 is also equal to not a number. So it is an absorbing number which will be used to represent the empty interval. So else means in case that a is smaller than b, and the upper bound and the lower bound will correspond to a and b. Okay, so it was the constructor. Now I will define the addition. So definition of the addition. So here this is a specific keyword that tells us that it's I am programming now the sum, the plus. So it corresponds to overloading the plus. So I have two values, x and y. So here I am programming x plus y. In this case, I will return the interval corresponding to the sum of the two lower bound, x plus lower bound plus y dot lower bound, and I will do the same with the upper bound. Upper bound, upper bound. Here, this. So it corresponds to the sum. Now I will try this program in the main file. So in the main. So how it works, I will do if the name corresponds. So when I call it, if the name corresponds to main, so here the main program will say, for instance, x equal to interval of minus 2, 2, for instance, y equal interval of 3 and 4, and here I will print. I have, maybe if I want to print, I want to print x plus y, but I have to define what means print for an interval. For the print, I will have to program a definition for the representation, so def representation of an interval x. So at the end I have to put this, and here also, here and here. Okay, so the representation of x, I will return, so it will be a string corresponding to, so here it will be a float corresponding to the lower bound, a float corresponding to the upper bound, and here I will write x dot lower bound and y dot upper bound. So of course here it should be a string. Up. I have to close the parentheses, x of course, and I obtain 1/6. I obtain 1/6, which corresponds to the sum of the two of them. So to be more clear, I will do here print x equal x, here print y equal to y, and here x plus y equal x plus y. Excuse me, a comma. So x, y, and Since I have overloaded the plus, I can do plus y like this, plus y, and Python understands. So I have programmed the plus. I will have to add a new function. For instance, it would be nice to see if interval is empty. So def is empty of x. So return so it is in math dot is not a number of x dot lower bound, for instance, because if it is empty, both lower bound and upper bound corresponds to not a number. So for instance, if here I put let me come back, x plus y, if here I put 2 minus 2, which does not correspond to an interval, then I will be in a situation where A greater than B, and I will generate an empty set. Is empty of x double dot. Okay, so x plus y is now not a number due to the fact that x is also the empty set. I have implemented the plus. I have also to implement the minus, multiplication, division. That's what I will do now. So about the subtraction, the keyword is sub, x and y. Here I will return the upper bound of x minus the lower bound, and the lower bound of x minus upper bound of x minus lower bound of y. So sorry, here it was lower bound of x, upper bound of y, upper bound minus lower bound. That's good. So here it's the overloading of the minus. I will also define, so let me check, x minus, so it will understand. Not a number, but if I write, for instance, 4, 5, I can check that the result is correct. I will also do the multiplication, so subtraction, the multiplication. So for the multiplication, I will build a list with all products. In this list, I will have the multiplication of the lower bounds, so upper bound, lower bound, upper bound, upper bound. So I compute all the different products. Then I will return the minimum of the list L and the maximum of L. So this is for the multiplication. Now I can have other type of multiplication. For instance, if I write a real number, for instance, if I write 2 times x, where 2 is not an interval but a real number, so in Python I have to write the ARMUL keyword. So for this I will return x. I will have to transform it into an interval, so x plus, I will call the multiplication, excuse me, I will return the multiplication with the interval of I will have to build y and y. Okay. Now I will add also another function such that what can be overloaded is a int to check if a real number is inside. So I will write contains, so the keyword is contains, x and a, and I will return x dot lower bound smaller than a smaller than x dot upper bound. So this one will return a boolean. I will now implement the division. So in Python it is true division. For the true division of x and y, so here division, return. So I have different cases. If 0 is inside the denominator y, what should I do in this case? I should return interval from minus infinity plus infinity. Otherwise, I should return x multiplied by 1 divided by the upper bound of y and 1 divided by the lower bound. Okay, sometimes I put a dot because normally it should be a float, not an integer. And with the division, I prefer to be sure that Python will consider as a float. Of course, for this division, I will have to define what means infinity. And the infinity, so here with not a number, I will define infinity as float of infinity. In Python is like this. So let me check the multiplication. Oh, if 0 in y, of course, this. So the multiplication is okay. And what about the division? Okay, so one error is here, else. And also the, yeah, okay, here also, so that you can understand this. So when I call in here, it will call contains here. Okay, so for the division, it's okay. Now I have to implement the square. So I will implement the square outside the class. So here I have to take care of the indentation. So that I can call the square of an interval. It will not be a method of the class. Square of x. So for the square, I have to build a list which contains x lower bound square and the same with the upper bound. Now I have to distinguish two cases. If 0 is in x, in this case I will have to return the interval with the lower bound 0 and the upper bound max of L. Else I will have to return the max, but here the mean, because now my function is decreasing or increasing, it depends. So this is for the square. I will check it. Square of x, square of x. Okay, it seems to work. Now I also have to implement the mean and the max, and after to check the library in the question number 2. I will have to check with everything I have done before. Maybe I will also go directly to the question number 3, where I have to test this function on this number. First I will finish with mean and max. Definition, mini of x and y, and return. I will return an interval which contains the minimum of the lower bound. So minimum of x dot lower bound, x dot upper bound, excuse me, y dot lower bound, and I will do also the same, but with the upper bound. So it will correspond to the mean, and for the max it will be exactly the same, except that I have to replace here max and here max. I need also the exponential, which is monotonic, so it's not very difficult. For the exponential, I will have only x. Of course here, double dot. For the exponential, I will have to return the exponential of x dot lower bound and x dot upper bound. Upper bound, but it is in the math library, so I have to add math. So return interval here also here also. Okay, now I will have also to program the logarithm, which is quite easy also because it is monotonic. The logarithm, I have to check different cases because the domain of the logarithm is not R. So if x dot upper bound is smaller than 0, it means that all the interval is on the left. Then in this case, I will have to return the empty interval. So let's say 1, 0. So it is the empty interval. Else. So else, if 0 is in x, what should I do in this case? I should return an interval of minus infinity and math dot the logarithm of x dot upper bound. Else, so it is monotonic, so very easily I can write return this for the upper bound, but here for the lower bound. Okay. I will check here for its exponential. Okay, it seems to work. The logarithm. So of course I will have to test for different cases with unary test, but here I check a few of them. Okay, so the interval library seems to work, and I will go to the last question. I consider here this function, and I will evaluate it for x between -2 and 2. I will do this using interval arithmetic, so I will perform this operation with intervals. So x will correspond to -2 and 2, and I will do print 2 times x minus exponential of x so it was square of x to start, square of x minus plus 2 times x minus exponential of x equal okay, we'll remove this. And it returns me the interval -11, 7. So I am sure that for all x between -2 and 2, the result of this function for all x inside will be inside this interval.